And I'm here to tell you, churches can turn into these amazing whirlpools that suck the life out of people because they're drains, they're corporate drains. And everybody goes because they think they should, and they do it as long as they can, and eventually they quit. Or they just get stoic about it and go and leave, and I guess I did it. And I open the door, and I smell the food. When I walk into a restaurant, and I smell the food. When I walk by a beautiful presentation of the food, especially if I've had it before, this is simple. I want more. I want more. God never intended that we have to get people's arm behind their back. You ever had somebody do this to you? And they tell you to say uncle. I think boys like to do it to each other. I don't think girls do it so much. But boys like to prove that they can get you in a rough spot and make you give in. And the last thing anybody wants to say is uncle. Because liberty of conscience was designed because God wants us to have the freedom to choose without coercion. But when we theologically try to force people to ascribe to our theological tenets, but I tell you what, if the beauty of Christ is flowing out of you, and the joy of spending time with you is clearly seen to them to be a function of the beautiful courtesy, love, humility, thoughtfulness of a living Christ, and they've not bumped into that a lot in the world. You see, Christianity is either very real or it's the most unreal. And you're either a fountain or a drain. So decide. You're 12 years old, you're either a fountain or a drain. You're either sucking the life out of people or putting the life into people. You married? Person sitting next to you is either a fountain or a drain. And I'm here to tell you, churches can turn into these amazing whirlpools that suck the life out of people because they're drains, they're corporate drains. And everybody goes because they think they should, and they do it as long as they can, and eventually they quit. Or they just get stoic about it and go and leave, and I guess I did it. If you want to fill this church up to tell them about the good news about Jesus bringing this mess to an end, we're going to have to go about it in a different way than sometimes we've gone about it, because the last thing we need is another version of the ABC News or the NBC News telling us how bad the world's getting. And now we've got the biblical version of the dirty laundry and how bad it is and how the top is in its wobble stage, etc.
The power of example is great. Sister A ventures to wear small hoops. Sister B says, "It is no worse for me to wear small hoops than for Sister A, and she wears them a little larger." Sister C imitates the example of Sisters A and B and wears her hoops a little larger than A and B, but all contend that their hoops are small.
What I want you to know is that the people responded to the love of Jesus because they tasted and saw that he was good. He was a living fountain. He was a stream in the desert.
Complicity of the Columbia Union is ordained to the gospel ministry of the Seventh-day Adventist Church female LGBT ally and advocate, Joanne Cortez.
Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God.
National Sunday laws will come, persecution will come, but nothing of that sort is in the pipeline at the present time, nothing that we have understood.
If you have to go to hell, go by yourself. Don't evangelize others into hell with you. Go by yourself.
Now, in Matthew chapter 9, there's an amazing verse. Matthew chapter 9, verse 13. This is what he says. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not what? Sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Now, most of what's written in the book of Matthew is preached to the church. Now, when I was in India on one of my trips, I took 3 trips to India, and we preached the gospel, and we visited the homes, and we told children's stories, and we did health messages. And every one of those trips, I made a spiritual pilgrimage for the people who went. I trained them ahead of time. I called them to a John the Baptist lifestyle. I got them ready to share the gospel. Those trips were opportunities for them to grow and stretch and their heart to be given in the pouring out of the gospel. But when I was there, I got sick. And one day I was laying on my bed reading through the book of Matthew, and I read this verse. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. There's a lot of sacrificing going on in Jesus' day, wasn't there? It was kind of the temple routine, wasn't it?
Well, I'd like to say happy Sabbath, family. We are all part of the family of God. And by the way, I was so delighted with that group of young people that were sitting across this pew. Do you know this church is rich? It's rich, and there's the treasure.
But flip over just a little bit to the 12th chapter. And so it's a day or two later, and I'm reading through the book of Matthew, and I get to Matthew chapter 12, verse 7. And this is what it says. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the innocent. And I'm thinking to myself, did I just read this the other day or what? And I'm starting to ask myself, why would Jesus take one of the 23,145 verses in the Old Testament and repeat it 2 times? Why would Matthew grab it 2 times from the book of Hosea and write it down for all time and eternity? And I'm going to tell you why. It goes like this. She was caught in the very act of adultery.
Hello, friends. So good to be in touch with you again. You've been a precious part of my life over the last several years, and it brings me great sadness to tell you this will be the last video that's produced where I am talking to you on this channel. On Sunday, December 1, at the end of my Thanksgiving vacation, I got a phone call at 3:16 telling me I needed to be at the conference office the next day. I was there to discuss employment issues. Things were brought up that I thought had been resolved, and I was told they were not resolved at the level I thought they were. I asked for the presentation of the grievances against me in writing. They said no. The next day I was before the conference committee, not knowing exactly what had been said about me before I went in.
They drug her to the temple, and she thought she was going to die. And it was a complete setup, and they were terrible, heinous, cruel preachers. And they got her in there. And they said, Jesus, teacher, rabbi, you know what the law says about this, don't you? And Jesus, who came full of what? Truth and grace, or grace and truth? Okay, we got it right. Get it right with your neighbor. Get it right with your spouse. Get it right with your kids. Get it right with your fellow church member. Get it right with your pastor. Get it right with everybody. And you'll find that you're a fountain and not a drain, and people will taste and see that relationally and personally being around you is good. And they want him to say, yep, you're right, take her out. But instead, he acts like he can't hear them, and he kneels down in the dust, and the finger that blazed the Ten Commandments into stone just writes in the sand, but he could have blazed it into the stone pavement of the temple every bit as much as he had blazed it onto the lapis lazuli that the Ten Commandments were written on, that beautiful blue stone. And he's writing in the sand. Well, it's a culture of honor, so the old people look over his shoulders first. And as soon as Jesus knows he's gotten the message, he takes that same hand and just goes like this and erases it. He can tell who's looking over his shoulder, even though he's not looking, and he's writing for them next. And what is he saying is? He's saying, with grace, I'm giving you the benefit you didn't give that woman. This is who you really are. And you know what? They're afraid to stick around him because he can tell the truth if he wants to tell it. But he's a man of grace. And finally, after she's quit shivering and shaking out of stress, and everybody's gone, he stands up and he says, where'd they all go? Is there nobody to condemn you? Listen, the accuser of the brethren is not our best friend. And while sometimes we got to deal with issues, we still need to do it with, what was the formula? Grace and truth. And by the way, the last time you got stopped by the state police, or you got held to account by your spouse, or your boss said to you, it isn't working quite right, you understand how valuable grace is, don't you? The human heart craves it, doesn't deserve it, really should just get justice. But since Jesus is a stream in the desert, and since we are to be fountains, it's not that hard to talk about the end if you can bring their self-made, destructive, unsatisfying lifestyles to an end and introduce them to one who can give them a new beginning. Yes, 23,145 times, and Jesus somehow repeats this verse enough. He might have repeated it more than this, but Matthew, the detail man, wrote it down for us 2 times.
And we would just like to take some time right now to just discuss some questions that we had. A lot of our viewers, people that call us, contact us, they know we're associated with you and they ask us a lot of questions. So we would like to just go ahead and cover some of those things. First question would be, what happened in Australia exactly? You are being called a quack, you are being called someone that's crazy out there. So what really is the truth? What happened? Why were you banned?
Yes, it was a shock to us because it really had no foundation. In fact, when the complaint first came to us from the HCCC, we laughed. We thought, surely this is a joke. We didn't really take it seriously. And I had to answer every question, and I felt I did, but I realised now they wanted scientific study. Studies, that's what they wanted. But when you look back at how did this happen, where did it all start? So the only way to explain it is that my husband has a political party. It's the Informed Medical Options Party, campaigning for the rights of Australians to have free choice. And I spoke at one of their rallies, and I spoke on the laws of health. Mm-hmm. And then 3 days later, Michael looked at the people's website, and they said, we've got to take this woman down. Are there any volunteers?
Wow.
So 3 people came forward, people I have never met. I think a nutritionist from Queensland was one of them. And she had looked obviously through my lectures and came up with something like the goat's milk, and then made complaints to the Healthcare Complaints Commission. And if they get a complaint, they have to pursue it. So they did, but they weren't happy with my answers, so I ended up having to go to a tribunal. I call it the Inquisition, where 4 people interviewed me, and I had Michael one side and the lawyer on the other, but they were not allowed to speak. Everything was taped, and for 2 hours they questioned me. What they were really hoping for, to find a statement where I said, this will cure cancer, but I have never said such a thing, and they could not find it. But eventually, when it had all finished and we spoke with our lawyer, she said, I can't believe it, they've got nothing on you. So she goes through these sorts of things all the time. And Michael said, does that mean Barbara will be freed from this ban? And she said, oh no, she'll get a life ban, but she won't go to jail, because if she was guilty, she'd go to jail. So that's the justice system. And we found that the Healthcare Complaints Commission, you can't go higher than that, and they seem to be accountable to no one. So they have the authority to ban me for life. I can't speak, I can't give any advice, or 10 years jail. So, so that's what happened. So my husband was so incensed. He wanted to do something, and we thought of taking it to court, and then we found out it would cost $500 to even start the process, and it could go on for years, and it could cost us everything. So Michael wrote the book, The Assassination of Barbara Oneill. I said, that's a bit strong. He said, no, it's good. It's good. And he wrote that, I guess, in my defense. And so, because some people say, you must have done something for them to come after you. So I say, well, read the book. Read the book, it explains. So it was hard for me at first, because my aim is really just to educate, to help people to get better health. And I've been stopped. Michael said, well, you've got a choice. You can retire, or you can just go overseas. So I said, well, I've never had so much knowledge in my mind. I've never had so much experience. And I still feel young, I still feel fit, I still have a lot of energy. I'll go overseas. So that ended up what happened. And in 2021, when I was in Germany speaking at a conference, a lady came up and she said, I'm so sorry to say this, Barbara, but we're so glad you were banned. Now you're free to come to us. And I thought, the ban has freed me. Because I could never travel for long, because I had to always be back for the program. And another blessing that's come out of this is the program could not run without me, because people would not book in unless I was there. Well, now people are booking in for the program, and now I'm free to go elsewhere. So I now see why God. It was early 2022.
We were sure that America would have opened their doors by now, but they hadn't. You could not get in unless you had that certain pass. And I was booked 2 months in the US, February and March. But I did have an exemption from an Irish doctor, but in America they can say we don't accept exemptions from Irish doctors. Michael tried to put me in online. They wouldn't accept it unless I showed that certificate. So Michael came to the airport with me, Port Macquarie. He said, I think we're going to have trouble. I've got papers here, I've got the exemption. As we walked into the terminal, the guy looked up and said, hey, Barb. Well, they know me well. I fly a lot. He said, hey, Barb, they've changed your flight. I said, have they? Well, the change was just 2 hours. But it meant that the next flight and the next flight all had to be adjusted. So he's busy working this out on the computer. Yeah. Put your bags on. Bags went through, labelled them, gave me my boarding passes, said, have a good flight. No question. And I think I can't understand that. All I can think that God put a veil over his eyes not to ask me where my, that vaccine passport is. So Michael and I are walking along looking at each other and said, well, I'm in. My bags are now going right through to Dallas. I just had to fly to Sydney and then get on the plane to Dallas. And Michael said, don't get the free bus from the domestic to the international, because when you get to the international, they want to look at your passport, what are you doing, where are you going? He said, just get the train and go through security with everyone else and you'll bypass that checkpoint. So I did. And then, praise be to God, I got an upgrade to business class. And when you're in business class, it's almost, come through. And in I went and I just smiled. Everyone I meet, I just smile like an idiot. Smile. And, the Bible says in Proverbs 22:11, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. It's 11:22. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. And I'm on the plane. We land in Dallas, 15 hours later. And they said over the loudspeaker, have your vaccine pass ready. Immigration will require it. You will not be able to enter into the US without it. Now, right at that point, what do my feelings do? But at the same time, I hold on to faith. I hold on to faith. God reaches for that hand of faith in us. He's reaching, but we have to also reach up. And I said, well, Father in heaven, my life's in your hands. And what can they do to me? Send me home? I can handle that. People say, what's your favourite place to be? I said, Australia. So I love Australia. I don't know so much about the ruling powers, but I love Australia. I love the people. I love the landscape. So here's this dialogue in my mind. What are they going to do to you? Send you home. So be it. So I'm standing in line. I'm very fit, so I walk very fast. So I'm one of the first people down there. I go past all the slow coaches. And there's 2 people in front of me, and I can hear immigration saying, what's your reason for coming? Where are you staying? Where's your vaccine pass? They really drill you. Then the feelings come up again. But God gives us a choice. The choice is faith or fear. And what's the Bible verse for fear? It's found in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, where God says, I have not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. What's a sound mind does? It does what my brain was doing. What's the worst that can happen? Don't worry about it. Whatever. And faith is found in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. I had to have faith. My hope was I was going to get in. There were a lot of people depending. They kept saying, are you sure? And we said, well, we're doing the best we can. What else can we do? We just leave the rest with God. And I know that God is able. It says in Ephesians 3:20, unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. And every morning I surrender my heart to God and ask for that Holy Spirit to guide me. So you've got strength, you've got help, especially when your feelings are going, I'm in God's hands. Just before I was to call up, another guy opened his booth and called me over. 2 guys went first, but when they saw me, they let me go first. And so he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going into the US. Where are you staying? I'm going to be staying with my daughter. My daughter lives in Wisconsin. My daughter's got 7 children. And my daughter's eldest son, he's just had a baby. So even though I have many grandchildren, I now have a great-grandchild. Chat, 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 chat. Smile, smile. So excited to coming in. He stamped my passport, gave it to me and said, have a good trip. I walked through and I'm texting Michael, I'm in. I'm in. An illustration of trust. We are all challenged. It's not always easy. But God says, trust me. Trust me. I'm able to do more than you can imagine. And so 24 hours later, I'm speaking to 300 people, and at the end, there were some questions, and one lady said, how'd you get into the US? I said, God is able. He's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. Next question. Because Michael said, don't tell anyone, because if it gets on social media, you might get a knock on the door and they might evict you.
Jesus came full of, does anybody know the rest of the sentence? Grace and truth. Now, some Adventists think he came full of truth and grace. I want you to listen to me. That's not how he came. He came full of grace and truth.